In the 1940s, a club from the Romanian city of Oradea completed an unusual feat. They managed to win the Football League of two separate nations without having to move across international borders, because international borders moved across them 3 times. To understand how this footballing hokey-cokey happened, our story starts not in 1940s Romania, but 3 decades earlier, in Austria-Hungary. In May of 1910, a group of local football nuts founded Nagyvárad Atletic Club, NAC for short, thankfully for me, in Nagyvárad, the Hungarian name for Oradea, a city about 200 kilometers away from the border with Romania. This border would become very important because it's best described as, fluid. The club initially played their matches in a park just north of the river that splits the city. On a surface that is described as so stony, it caused many injuries. With the physio room overflowing, the club quickly relocated to a more appropriate venue, in Rade Park, Stadion Tinietui. The club played its first match on July 31st, 1910, a 2-1 loss against KVSC. Undeterred, the club registered with the Hungarian Football Federation and soon became a force in their regional division, winning their regional final in 1913 and were on course to do the same in 1914. However, a little thing called World War I soon stopped them in their tracks, setting the tone for a club whose destiny would soon be tied to geopolitics. Flash forward, the not-so-great war ended, and Austria-Hungary was forced to trade in its hyphen for an ampersand to become the slightly less imposing and very separate nations of Austria and Hungary. To make matters worse for Hungary, they had a bunch of territory gobbled up, around 70% of it, by the new countries of Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia, and a new border with their neighbours to the east, Romania. Oradea, and by extension NAC, found themselves just across this new border, which would have been very confusing for the locals given that before the war, around 91% of Oradea's population was Hungarian. As you might expect, this handover of territory was accompanied by much unrest. Many Hungarians, especially officials and elites, fled west to Budapest, while others stayed and adapted to the new Romanian administration. In Oradea, the city's demographic began to shift. By 1930, Oradea's Hungarian population had shrunk to around 50%. From 1921 onward, the club competed in the Romanian football system under a new name, Club Atletic Oradea, or CA Oradea, or CAO. Between 1921 and 1932, clubs had to earn their spot in the Romanian National Championship, a straight knockout competition, by winning their respective regional league stage. For their first 2 seasons in Romania, CAO were pipped to the regional championship by neighbours Stolința in the 21-22 season and Înțelegărea Oradea in the 22-23 season. Side note, my deepest apologies to anyone in Romania or Hungary listening to this. But third time's the charm, and in 1924, CAO had their first shot at glory by qualifying for the national championship. After making it to the final, they were soundly beaten 4-1 by the Hulk Hogans of this era of Romanian football, Chinezul Timișoara, who were in the middle of winning 6 championships in a row between 1921 and 1927. Despite getting squashed in the final, the club from Oradea soon became a force in interwar Romanian football. A 1932 Tour of France saw Oradea defeat Olympique Lillois, who went on to become the French champions that season. In the 1934-1935 season, CAO finished runners-up in the new-look Romanian top flight, thanks in part to many of the internationals at the club. Notable names include Ferenc Ronay, scorer of Romania's first-ever international goal in 1922, Nicolae Kovac, one of the few men to play at the first 3 World Cups, and Liliu Bodala, who would go on to become the Romanian national side's top goalscorer before the record was taken by Gheorghe Hagi and Adrian Mutu. Yet, by the late 1930s, the club hit a rough patch. In the 1937-1938 season, CA Oradea was relegated to Divizia B amid a league reshuffle-mabob. It seemed for a brief while like their best days of finishing perpetual runners-up might be behind them. Little did they know, an even bigger upheaval was coming, one that would register a little bit more on the Richter scale than a Romanian football restructure. In 1939, war broke out in Europe, which meant the dictators at the time were playing musical chairs with European borders. Romania was in the middle of a fire sale on its territory in an attempt to not get invaded, and Hungary wanted in on some of that action to reclaim some of the territory it lost post the First World War. In August 1940, Hitler brokered the not-as-fun-as-it-sounds Second Vienna Award, which took northern Transylvania, including Oradea, from Romania and gave it to Hungary. Again. The club brushed off their old NAC banners and returned to the pitch as part of Hungary's footballing pyramid. This redrawing of the maps triggered reprisals, expulsions and violence. As Romanians fled south, Hungarians returned north, and Oradea's Jewish community soon faced ghettoization and eventually deportation to concentration camps while under Nazi occupation in 1944. The city was changing around the club in ways far more brutal than a new set of league fixtures. The Second Vienna Award also caused an interesting side effect for the club. For many top players in Romania, some of which were of Hungarian or German descent, the chance to play across the new border was very appealing, especially for those displaced by the war and with the general political unrest in Romania at the time. Suddenly, NAC was bolstered by an influx of top talent, such as Josef Pishovsky and a returning Iuliu Bodela. They quickly became Transylvania's answer to the Galacticos, managed by former player Ferenc Ronay. What followed was a complete power shift. In the 1942-1943 Hungarian top flight, the newly revamped NAC finished as runners-up. And the following season, Nagyvárad AC, a club that a few years earlier had been in Romania's second tier, became the champions of Hungary, dominating the league in emphatic fashion. They finished 13 points clear of Ferencváros in second place, an achievement made all the more impressive when you realise that this was during the era of 2-point wins and there were only 30 games in a league season. Their triumph was historic. NAC were the first team from outside of Budapest to win the Hungarian Championship in its 44-year history. But as fate, or more literally the incoming Red Army would have it, the reign atop of Hungarian football was short-lived. NAC wouldn't have the chance to defend their title. The following season was abandoned after only 4 games due to the advancing Eastern Front. By October 1944, the Soviet troops were in town, and the city's brief return to Hungary was over. NAC would never play another match in the Hungarian League again. After the war ended in 1945, Oradea traded places once again and was handed back to Romania. The club returned to the Romanian league system, though under new management, to put it mildly. The late 1940s in Romania saw the rise of a Soviet-backed communist regime, which meant big changes for all sporting clubs. The club initially reverted to its Romanian name, but that wouldn't last long. The new authorities were keen to rebrand teams in line with catchy socialist naming conventions, and CAO were no exception. The club was taken over by a local trade cooperative, and in 1948 was renamed Libertate Oradea, meaning liberty, which was somewhat ironic. In 1949, the club was renamed again to ICO Oradea, short for, you can read that. Essentially, Urban Communal Enterprise Oradea in English. Jesus Christ, lads, at least workshop the names a little. If this identity crisis wasn't bad enough, the championship-winning squad itself had been torn apart. With Transylvania back in Romania, several of Oradea's star players moved on to other clubs, such as Vasas and Ferencváros in Budapest, as well as newly formed Atletic Oradea, who would become one of the most successful clubs of the post-war era. Despite the exodus of talent, the club managed to at least remain competitive in Romania's Divizia A. In the 1946-47 and 1947-48 seasons, finishing 8th and 6th respectively, yet they still had one more trick up their sleeve. In the 1948-49 season, the club stunned everyone by winning the Romanian Divizia A. 5 years after becoming the champions of Hungary, they became the champions of Romania. And they did it with basically a rebuilt team. The 1949 Romanian title completed an extraordinary double for the Oradeian side. However, it marked the beginning of the end for the club as a major force. Like in many countries east of the Iron Curtain, Romanian football was changing. New state-sponsored teams like Steaua Bucharest and Dinamo Bucharest were emerging, backed by the army, interior ministry, and they would soon dominate the game. Still, Oradea managed to snag one more trophy for the road, the Romanian Cup in 1956, under yet a new name, Progresul Oradea. The annual rebrand wouldn't stop there. After Progresul, the club was briefly renamed to Clubul Sportiv Oradea in 1958. Then in 1961 it was rebranded Crișana Oradea, which was extremely confusing because Crișana Oradea had been the name of another club in the city which had gone sideways years earlier. By this point, the glory days were clearly in the rearview mirror. The club bounced between Romania's first and second divisions in the late 50s and early 60s, until, in 1963, the end finally came. After a rough season and dwindling support, CAO, under the name Crișana, was dissolved, officially disbanded by the communist authorities, who never really favoured the club anyway, and were stuck in the Romanian footballing bin. It was an unceremonious demise for a club that had not long before sat on 2 national thrones, and for a long time it seemed like the story might end there. However, the club had a rebirth of sorts decades later. Some passionate folks in Oradea decided it was time to revive the old club. In 2017, Club Atletic Oradea was re-established and entered the Romanian 5th tier. This Phoenix club is keeping the memory alive and giving new generations a chance to support the legendary name. Hopefully they'll just stick with the one this time. Not many clubs can say their trophy cabinet includes league titles from 2 different national associations. Rapid Vienna managed it by winning both the Austrian and German Bundesliga during the Anschluss. Derry City have won both the Irish Football League and League of Ireland. Oradea/Nagyvárad find themselves as part of this very small club. Every border change in this period brought upheaval, expulsions, reprisals, and in 1944, the destruction of Oradea's Jewish community. For the club, those same upheavals reshaped squads and leagues. For the people of the city, they reshaped lives. One year they were living in Hungary, the next Romania. And many of the club's players carried that same ambiguity, occasionally representing both countries at the international level. So the story of CAO/NAC is far more than just an interesting piece of footballing lore. It captures a place where identities overlap, where politics redraws the map faster than people can keep up, and where football becomes one of the reflections of the world around it.